Hey guys, you've heard of the Boston Tea Party, right? Maybe the Paris barricades? Maybe South Africa, where songs overpowered rifles. But it started much earlier than that. Before hashtags, before constitutions, there was Egypt, a strike, bread stolen in silence. And after that, Athens, Rome, France, Haiti, Russia, China. Even now, Hong Kong, Iran, Colombia, Sudan. Protest isn't chaos, it's a language, and once spoken, it never shuts up. If this atmospheric history helps you slow down and drift off, go ahead and like and subscribe. It's free, and you can always change your mind later. Drop your city and local time in the comments. Who else is still awake with us tonight? So, close your eyes, breathe in that desert dust, and come walk with me, quietly now, right into the world's first recorded strike. It's 1152 BCE. The air over Deir el Medina, tucked into a dry valley west of Thebes, vibrates with heat and silence. This village isn't just any dusty outpost. It's where the artisans who build the pharaohs' tombs live and work. They're skilled, respected, but they're also bound. Their hands carve eternity, but tonight they put down their chisels. You trudge with them down a narrow path, flanked by high mud brick walls. The tools rest inside the tombs, unfinished. And that silence, it's louder than any protest chant. That's the whole trick. No drama, just refusal. They gather near the temple of Ramses III, not to kneel, but to wait. They don't riot. They sit, hungry, tired, and angry. Their grievance? Delayed wages, mostly in the form of barley, fish, and beer. Not exactly gold bars, but when you're breaking your back sealing tomb chambers for a living god, you expect your share. Historians still argue whether this was a spontaneous act or a calculated move. But one thing's clear. You're watching the invention of organized labor. The scribe of the tomb keeps a record. That's how we know. He jots down that the men simply walked out. They told the officials politely, "We are hungry. Truly, there is no food." Imagine writing that down with a reed pen while someone stares at you with sunken cheeks and sand-cracked lips. And here's a delightful little twist of history. The workers' next step is straight up petty. They don't just picket. They block access to royal tombs, as if to say, if we can't eat, the dead can't rest. Sleepy vengeance, ancient style. Over time, officials cough up food and drink. The men go back, but not quietly. They'll do it again and again, across years, sometimes over pay, sometimes conditions. They were, if you'll allow the phrase, unshakably unionized. The beauty is, they didn't have modern vocabulary for this. No manifestos, no slogans, just the raw human truth. If you starve the hands that build heaven, heaven stays unfinished. And if you're picturing dusty guys with picket signs, try again. These were artisans, tomb decorators, masters of pigment and proportion. They protested with dignity, like someone might be watching, which, funny enough, you are. By the way, did you know that ancient Egyptian women could own property, initiate divorce, and even sue in court? That's right. Somewhere in this same village, a woman named Naunacht is scribbling her will. She's disinheriting 4 of her kids for being ungrateful. Protest runs in the family, it seems. There's something dreamy and strange about the way ancient Egypt handles dissent. It's quiet, wound tight. Protest isn't the crashing of cymbals. It's the refusal to move. A human statue, a hunger that carves its message into memory. And still, whispers float through those sun-baked alleys. What if we stop building tombs entirely? What if the afterlife remains unfinished? No revolution comes, but the seed is there, wrapped in linen, stashed between lines of papyrus, a kind of sacred resistance, one that says even in a world built on cosmic order, Ma'at, balance, divine hierarchy, sometimes the order needs a push. Historians debate whether this moment really sparked a legacy or if it's just a blip in an otherwise obedient culture. But the echoes are clear enough. You can still hear it if you tilt your ear toward Thebes. A dusty voice murmuring, "We are hungry. Truly there is no food." That same voice whispers beneath every protest since. And as the stars glide over the Valley of the Kings, and the paint dries on another god's afterlife mural, you slip deeper into the dream. Because rebellion doesn't always begin with fire. Sometimes it begins with silence. The heat shifts. The sand underfoot gives way to rough stone. You're farther west now. Centuries forward, sandals traded for dusty leather. The Nile replaced by the whisper of olive branches and the clink of amphorae. Welcome to Athens. Classical Athens, the place where people claim democracy was born. But don't get too comfortable. The voting's messy, the temper's sharp, and protest? Oh, protest comes with olive oil, theater masks, and the occasional fistfight in the agora. You step into the agora just as the sun's angled low. Late afternoon, when the market buzz quiets and the men in Himation start yelling. Not everyone's voice counts, you quickly notice. Women, slaves, medics, foreign residents are ghost-like here, present, but voiceless. So the men roar extra loudly to fill the silence. Someone's angry about grain prices. Someone else throws shade about naval spending. And someone somewhere always blames the Spartans. You're not sure whether this is democracy or just a very aggressive podcast with live heckling. But look closer. Athens is strange in its confidence. Citizens can exile each other with a vote. Just write a name on a piece of pottery, an ostracon, and boom, 10 years in the countryside for Themistocles, or whoever irritated you that week. Historians still argue whether ostracism was a tool of justice or just a sanctioned popularity contest. But either way, that's democracy, baby. Yet behind the pageantry of civic pride and the white marble glow of the Parthenon, there's real discontent. Athens relies on slaves to keep its glitter polished. It wages war like it's a hobby, and when the Peloponnesian War drags on and men die by the thousands, protest stops being philosophical. It gets sharp. You're walking through a city on edge. Philosophers pace like caged lions. Socrates, always barefoot and infuriating, pokes the system until it bites back. He asks questions like, what is justice? But Athens, by then exhausted, answers with hemlock. Protest gets swallowed by fear. The same people who praised freedom of speech now whisper in wine-dark corners. But let's rewind. Before the fear, there's comedy. No, really. Protest in Athens often wears a mask and performs on stage. Picture this. A packed open-air theater, the scent of sweat and time in the air, and Aristophanes waddling onto the stage in a padded bird costume to roast political leaders by name. It's slapstick, but dangerous slapstick. In his play The Knights, Aristophanes literally turns the politician Cleon into a sausage seller. The audience howls. But this isn't just entertainment. It's protest with punchlines. Today you might tweet a meme. In Athens, you write a whole play about how the generals are idiots, and people clap until the wine spills. And yet, even as the chorus dances and mocks, there are quiet acts of defiance in private homes. Women gather during religious festivals like the Thesmophoria, officially to honor Demeter. but maybe also to vent. You lean in, and someone's whispering that the war's gone on too long, that their sons didn't come home, that maybe, just maybe, this isn't what Pericles promised. One fringe theory, hard to prove but delightful to imagine, suggests that some of these women staged ritual fasts, not just for Demeter, but as veiled anti-war statements. Historians still argue whether this was protest or piety, but you can't ignore the timing. Athens, even at its freest, has limits. Speak too boldly, and the city turns its back. Vote wrong, and you get shamed on a broken pot. So the clever find other ways. Masks, plays, fasts, drama, and sometimes walking away. As the war drags and plague hits, even citizens begin to turn. Food runs short, patience runs shorter. And one day, a general's trial becomes theater. Another, a scapegoat. You watch as the line between democracy and mob rule blurs like melted wax under the Attic sun. Still, there's beauty here. The idea that every man might speak his mind, even if just for a moment. That you can raise your hand, raise your voice, and matter. And just as quickly, there's heartbreak. Because Athens burns bright, then falters. The democracy that dared to protest its kings becomes a city that silences its critics and buries its ideals under marble ruins. But you don't forget it. No one does. Not the Romans, not the French, not the modern world, still quoting Plato between hashtags. Somewhere in this cracked stone street, a sandal scuffs the ground in frustration. Somewhere, a woman clenches her fist under her cloak. Somewhere, a playwright sharpens a quill. Protest survives not because it's loud, but because it adapts. And Athens? For all its flaws, it whispers something that stays with you tonight. That speaking out is messy, dangerous, and sometimes the most human thing you can do. You leave behind the olive trees and marble columns, and now the world feels heavier, grittier underfoot, and louder. The smell changes too. Less thyme and figs, more sweat, leather, and iron. Rome is rising, and with it, so is a new kind of protest. Slower, meaner, and wrapped in togas. It's early in the Roman Republic. You're not lounging in a villa or reciting Cicero yet. You're marching with the plebeians. And not metaphorically. You're literally walking out of the city. It's called the secession of the plebs, and you're part of it now. The patricians, those smug aristocrats, keep hoarding land and power. Meanwhile, your cousin's in debt prison. Your neighbor's ox was seized. And your own dinner? Mostly hope. So the plebeians say, no more. You stop farming, you stop serving in the army, and you abandon Rome itself, trekking up a hill outside the city like a frustrated festival of tired sandals. It's not exactly storming the Bastille, but Rome panics anyway. Why? Because without the plebs, everything collapses. No food, no labor, no soldiers. The rich can't rule if there's no one to rule. That's the genius here. No violence, just subtraction. Historians still argue whether this was a fully spontaneous walkout or a coordinated tactic. But whatever it was, it worked. Eventually, Rome caved and created the office of the Tribune of the Plebs, giving commoners a voice in government. Kind of. The tribunes could veto laws, which sounds powerful, until you realize they were constantly targeted. One fringe account even claims a tribune was assassinated with a stylus, a writing instrument turned shiv. Don't say words can't hurt you. Still, the plebeians keep pushing. Over decades, even centuries, they claw rights from the state, like stubborn bakers kneading old dough. Access to land, to law, to marriage across class lines. Progress here isn't a sprint, it's a political glacier. But you're on the slope now, and it's sliding forward. You slip into a side street. Someone selling pamphlets, except they're not called that yet. They're wax tablets scribbled with invective. A bad grain deal here, a corrupt magistrate there. You hear whispers about redistribution, about soldiers unpaid, about old veterans promised farms and given weeds. And there's more. The Gracchi brothers, Tiberius and Gaius, appear like twin comets in Roman politics. Reformers, idealists, and maybe a little reckless. They push for land reform, for dignity, for feeding the people who bleed for Rome. And what does Rome do? It beats Tiberius to death with a chair. No, really. A literal wooden stool. Senate meetings get wild. Gaius tries again a few years later, and when things go sour, he dies too. By his own hand, legend says, with a loyal slave finishing the job. Rome leaves both brothers in the Tiber. Their reforms die with them. But the people, they don't forget. You feel it in the street corners, in the way someone mutters Gracchus under their breath when the grain stalls run dry. Protest leaves echoes like graffiti. Speaking of which, did you know the ancient Romans were prolific bathroom graffiti artists? Seriously. One Pompeii wall reads, "I screwed the barmaid." Another, "Successus was here." And a third, delightfully rebellious, "The authorities are watching." A fringe theory suggests these public scrawls were more than crude jokes. They were cathartic protests by people who otherwise had no voice. Imagine venting your rage in a tavern toilet and accidentally leaving history a clue. By now, you're noticing a pattern. Protest in Rome isn't one big firework. It's lots of little sparks. Bread riots, political murders, satirical poetry with razor-sharp teeth. You overhear a slave reciting Juvenal's satires and can't tell if he's joking or threatening someone. And let's not forget the women. During the Second Punic War, they take to the streets in protest of a law that restricts their clothing and jewelry, the Lex Oppia. You chuckle as you watch them flood the forum, silks swishing and earrings glinting defiantly in the sun. And guess what? They win, law repealed, shopping resumes. Even protest can be fabulous. Still, Rome's grandest acts of defiance often feel doomed. Slaves rise up, most famously under Spartacus, a gladiator who turns shackled fury into an army. You walk beside him through volcanic ash and broken chains. For a while he wins, then inevitably he loses. 6,000 of his followers are crucified along the Appian Way. You don't need a scroll to understand the message. But protest never dies here. It mutates. It adapts. By the end of the Republic, senators stab Caesar not just out of ambition, but because they say he's a tyrant. Et tu, Brute is a protest too. And as the Republic crumbles and emperors rise, even then, protest lingers. Hidden in poems, in kitchen rumors, in the quiet rebellion of wearing the wrong color in the Colosseum stands. It's strange, isn't it? How even the mighty Rome, engine of conquest, builder of empires, can't fully silence the murmur of the crowd. So tonight, you lie back on the worn stones of the forum, the moon brushing across broken columns, and you listen. You can still hear them. Feet marching, styluses scratching, women laughing as they throw off old laws, plebeians walking away from a city that forgot who built it. The wind shifts again, carrying you east, and the warm Roman dust gives way to silk, incense, and the creak of lacquered carts. You're walking the corridors of Han China now, careful, measured steps on polished stone. Everything feels precise, ritualized. But don't let the calm fool you. Beneath the elegance, there's rumbling. Because even here, behind walls painted with dragons and calligraphy, people protest. You arrive during the reign of Emperor Wangmang, a man historians still argue over. Was he a reformer, a usurper, a misunderstood idealist? Either way, his rule crackles with revolt. You pass an imperial proclamation pinned to a wall. New land redistribution laws meant to equalize wealth. Sounds noble? In practice, chaotic? Landowners fume. Peasants hesitate. The middle class? Squeezed like tofu between stones. You wander deeper into the countryside. It's not the city you need to see. It's the rice fields. The peasants. Their feet are caked in mud. Their hands scarred by harvest. And when a bad flood hits, and their taxes still rise, that's the tipping point. So they organize. Not with banners or marches, with secret oaths, coded songs, and yellow cloth. You've just stumbled into the Yellow Turban Rebellion. It begins like a whisper in 184 CE and soon becomes a storm. Hundreds of thousands, yes, hundreds, rise under the symbol of yellow scarves, tied across foreheads like war paint. They follow Zhang Jue, a mystic healer preaching equality, healing, and the downfall of the corrupt. You trail them through mountain passes, through hushed villages, watching as they build their army from farmers and famine survivors. Their protest is religious, economic, and political all at once. They don't just want rice, they want a better world. The blue heaven is dead, the yellow heaven will rise, they chant. A slogan wrapped in hope and blood. The Han government panics, armies clash, and soon protest turns to war. And here's the twist. The rebellion fails. Crushed, brutally, but its echo, it tears apart the dynasty. The Han will never recover. Out of the ashes rise warlords, kingdoms, and eventually, 3 kingdoms that inspire centuries of legend. Still, not all protests here are so loud. You shift scenes. It's earlier now, and you're inside the imperial court. A scholar official bows low. His robes whisper against the tiles. He's submitting a memorial, a formal protest, couched in the politest language imaginable. Think of it as a love letter to justice, written in passive aggression. Confucian ideals demand harmony, but also honesty. So when a ruler veers off course, loyal ministers are expected to speak up. But it's a gamble. Sometimes they're praised, other times, executed. There's even a tale of a minister who knew he'd be killed for his protest, so he swallowed a jade tablet before the audience to preserve his legacy. When they buried him, they found the tablet and copied his last words. Hardcore. And did you know that in ancient China, women occasionally used poetry as protest? There's a fringe story about a concubine who composed a biting poem criticizing the emperor's neglect and pinned it to a palace tree. It was never confirmed, but the poem survived. So did the rumor. In this world, words travel like smoke. Then there's tax resistance. Quiet, but widespread. Entire villages vanish when the collectors come, slipping into the mountains like ghosts. Some even create fake floods, destroying irrigation canals to make their land look ruined. You walk through one such ghost village, empty bowls on the ground, hearths still warm. Protest here is absence. Historians still debate whether these early resistances were coordinated or spontaneous. But you know better now. You've seen the pattern. People pushed long enough will always find a way to push back. And protest in Han China, it's not always about anger. Sometimes it's a plea. A scholar leaving his post in silent resignation. A widow refusing to remarry. A teacher correcting the emperor in front of a class. These are subtle rebellions, wrapped in silk and ceremony. You return to the road, the Great Silk Road. Traders whisper stories as they pass, of rebellions brewing in the west, of scribes smuggling out secret essays hidden in scrolls. One tells of a courier who replaced an imperial edict with a poem of protest. He was never caught, but the poem lives on in folklore. And that's the thing. In China, protest doesn't always wear armor. It wears robes. It speaks softly, but it's no less dangerous. As the dynasty trembles, you lie down under a cherry tree, petals falling like pink snow, and listen to the wind rustle bamboo scrolls. Somewhere, a protest is being written in brushstrokes, too elegant for a battlefield, too sharp to ignore. The emperor might sit on a dragon throne, but tonight, you dream beside the peasants and poets who dared to speak, to sing, to vanish, and to rise again. The scent of cherry blossoms fades, and now you smell something darker: wet hay, ash, and the sharp tang of unwashed wool. You're standing in the countryside of medieval France. It's the 14th century, and the ground beneath you feels swollen with something. Tension, yes, but also filth, famine, and fire. You've walked into the Jacquerie. It's not a city riot, not a noble's plot. This is protest by pitchfork. You squint through the smoke and mud, and it's there. Peasants armed with pruning hooks and scythes, their faces streaked with soot, their voices hoarse from shouting. They're not protesting a law. They're protesting the world. The Black Death just wiped out a third of Europe. Whole villages gone, fields untended. And yet the taxes, they don't shrink. The lords raise them. Labor is short, but wages stay low. You bury your daughter in spring, and by winter, a man in armor is back to collect your last chicken. So now the peasantry burns. They call it the Jacquerie. Jacques being a generic name for a French peasant, like Joe Schmo with mud on his boots. But there's nothing generic about this rage. You follow a group moving toward a manor house. They don't speak much, just grunts. The occasional prayer, but it's bitter now. They torch the granaries first, then the wine, then the tapestries. You watch them storm through the bedrooms, dragging noble women into the courtyard, not to hurt them, but to strip them of silk and symbol. They hang satin bedsheets from oak branches, like mock flags of war. Historians still argue whether the Jacquerie was a planned uprising or a spontaneous outburst, likely both. It spreads quickly, brutally, and just as quickly, it's crushed. The nobles retaliate with terrifying efficiency. You hear the gallows groan, heads displayed on spikes. Entire hamlets vanish from maps, but something lingers. Not the rebellion itself, but the memory of it. The nobles are rattled now. You can see it in the way they rebuild their manors, with thicker walls and fewer windows. Protest left a bruise, and bruises remember. Yet the strangest thing, it's not the fire or the fury that stays with you. It's the songs. Yes, even here in the ashes of revolt, someone's singing. Ballads of vengeance, of lords turned to hogs, of justice arriving in the night with cloven hooves and peasant shoes. You move east now into Germany. It's the 16th century, and once again the people rise. This time they carry something heavier than pitchforks, pamphlets. The German Peasants' War explodes like a thunderclap. You're in the Rhineland now, in a tavern thick with smoke and ideas. The beer is bitter, the words sharper. Martin Luther's been nailing things to church doors, and suddenly everyone's reading. Or pretending to. The peasants? They've got 12 articles, a manifesto. They want fair tithes, the right to hunt, and to choose their own pastors. Sounds simple. Revolutionary even. Protest wrapped in ink. You march with them through mud and prayer, their boots heavy, their faith louder than their weapons. This time they believe God is on their side. And then Well, then Luther turns his back. He sides with the princes, tells them to crush the rebels like mad dogs. You hear that betrayal like a slap. One moment, he's a hero. The next, a ghost. The princes oblige. Blood runs into rivers, tens of thousands dead. The countryside hums with silence again. But you've been paying attention. You know silence doesn't mean peace. It means protest has gone to ground. And here's a lovely grim detail for your dreams tonight. Some rebels in this war wore branches in their hats. Why? To blend into the trees if they had to flee. Protest becomes camouflage, resistance, an art of vanishing. But the fringe stuff? That's where things get even weirder. In one corner of Swabia, a rumor swirls about a peasant prophet who can speak to animals and claims divine visions where God rides a pig. Historians roll their eyes, but the story spread like wildfire. Sometimes protest needs a myth to ride on, even if it's pork-powered. You fall asleep that night in a ruined barn, stars blinking through broken beams, listening to the whispers of old men who remember both songs and screams. One of them leans over and says, "We thought we were just hungry. Turns out, we were angry too." You nod, eyes heavy, feet muddy. From the fields of France to the forests of Germany, protest isn't noble. It isn't clean, but it's real. It rises like steam from a boiling pot, loud for a second, then absorbed back into the world, but it always leaves the water hotter. Now the mud dries. The harbor wind bites your neck. The air smells like salt, smoke, and something sharp, like ink freshly spilled across a manifesto. You're standing on a creaking dock in Boston, December 16th, 1773. Across the planks, boots scuff and scrape as a group of colonists, grown men dressed as Mohawk warriors, heave wooden crates into the black water. They move with purpose but not rage. This isn't chaos. It's choreography. This is protest wearing war paint. You hear the splash, then another. The crates hit the water like punctuation marks, loud, final, deliberate. They split open midair, sending leaves of tea swirling into the sea like dark confetti. A strange smell rises, tannins, salt, defiance. You hear muffled laughter, the grunt of a man proud of his aim, the rip of another crate. Their faces are blackened with soot and grease, not to hide, but to signal. This isn't disguise. It's a declaration in costume. Political theater. Rage in a mask. Over 300 chests, nearly 90,000 pounds. Today the harbor drinks tea instead of trade. It gurgles with Earl Grey and protest. You follow the men as they slip into the night. No names given, no speeches made. They vanish into Boston's winding streets, into the backs of taverns, into homes with drawn shutters and candlelit silence. But the silence doesn't last. The city holds its breath, because this isn't just a stunt. Something has shifted. Not a riot, not yet a revolution. A message, nailed to the waterline. And it's not about tea. Not really. It's about a parliament 3,000 miles away, powdering its face while taxing people it refuses to hear. It's about decisions made across an ocean, pressed into colonial throats without consent. It's about power that wears silk and speaks in decrees, and a people learning to speak back. Even in the heat of rebellion, there are lines. One protester tries to pocket a handful of tea during the raid, just a little personal loot. Another tackles him, furious. They're here to destroy, not steal. This is performance with purpose. Vandalism as virtue. Even rebellion has rules. Still, not everyone approves. Some colonists mutter that it's thuggery, that it will provoke retaliation. They're right. Within months, Parliament strikes back hard. the coercive acts. They'll call them the intolerable acts soon enough. Boston's port is sealed like a wound. Trade halts. Soldiers flood the city. Courts are shuttered. Meetings banned. You walk through the docks again. This time they stink of rotting fish and quiet rage. The tension thickens. The Sons of Liberty don't disappear. They multiply. You find yourself in a shadowed print shop. Ink-stained fingers set lead type in place as whispers pass between men. A teenage apprentice hands you a broadside, bold black letters carefully chosen. It doesn't scream. It asserts. Ideas are forming like storm clouds. Representation, natural rights, resistance. Not yet revolution, but its heartbeat is audible now. And in drawing rooms and spinning circles, women answer. The daughters of liberty gather in homes, spinning wool in circles that feel more like war councils. They boycott British cloth, invent colonial blends of herbal tea to sip in protest. A popular blend smells like rebellion, peppermint, and defiance. They wield spinning wheels and silence like weapons. And when necessary, they speak. Some even smuggle letters. Others organize boycotts. One urban legend says they used walnut shells and raspberry leaves to mimic the look of British tea, pouring it ceremoniously in gatherings like ritual mockery. Revolution in a teacup, and the streets continue to burn. You're there in 1770, 6 men deep in a crowd outside the custom house. A snowball arcs through the air, then a rock. Tensions snap. The crack of a musket shatters the air. A man falls, then another. The Boston Massacre, history will call it. But tonight, it's blood in the snow. You feel the silence that follows more than the screams. And later, you sit with Paul Revere in his workshop as he finishes his engraving. He's careful, precise. He doesn't draw what happened. He draws what must be remembered. He knows it's propaganda. That's the point. His copper plate is a weapon, and every copy pulled from it another musket ball for the mind. Every protest builds on the last, sparks seeking dry kindling. You ride south to Philadelphia. Inside Independence Hall, the air is thick with argument. Men in linen and sweat hammer out philosophies like iron on an anvil. They quote Locke, argue Cicero, paraphrase Roman law. Outside, the streets churn with rumor and hope. Inside, revolutions ferment in candlelight. The Declaration doesn't burst from nowhere. It drips from pens held by men who've spent years protesting in letters and speeches and silent refusals. And protest doesn't always come from the expected. You see a woman standing in a New York square. Her sign reads, "No taxation without representation." She owns nothing, can't vote, but she's shouting anyway. That's protest. You watch black soldiers line up with the promise of freedom echoing in their ears. Some are freed, many are not. That's protest too, when you fight for a cause that may not fight for you. And in the shadowed woods, native tribes gather. Some ally with the British, others stay neutral. Many watch. Their lands shrink with every map drawn by men in wigs and waistcoats. Their silence is heavy. Not ignorance, wisdom. They've seen empires rise and lie. Historians will argue for centuries about the American Revolution's soul. Was it democratic uprising, or just a reshuffling of elites? A bold new order, or an old one with better branding? But what's undeniable is where it starts. Not with cannon fire, not with parades of infantry, but with ink, with crates, with quiet fury given form, with a boy handing you a printed broadside in a crowded shop, with a woman brewing protest in a clay pot, with a man blackening his face with ash, not to hide, but to say, "Look at me. I am done being quiet. You lie under a tree near Concord now? The musket fire is distant. The night is thick with stars, cold, bright, unblinking. The war has begun, but you know the revolution started earlier. It began with a splash, a city throwing comfort overboard, one crate at a time, one leaf at a time. You wake to the clatter of hooves on cobblestones and the crisp flapping of tricolor banners. The air is heavy with gunpowder and perfume. Paris, 1830. Not quite the revolution with guillotines, not yet the grandeur of Napoleon's ghost. No, this is the in-between, where protest dresses like opera and bleeds like war. You hear it before you see it. Singing, not hymns, not chants. Something rowdier. Street music turned resistance. A boy stands on an overturned wine barrel, waving a red flag made from someone's bedsheet, his voice cracking as he belts out a tune too proud for his age. You recognize the moment, not from textbooks, but from theater. This is the July Revolution. You move with the crowd toward the barricades. And yes, there are actual barricades. Chairs, carriage wheels, dressers, bricks, entire bookshelves dragged out from homes and piled high. The streets aren't designed for this, but they adapt. That's what protest always does. And here's a niche detail to warm your imagination. Some of the earliest barricades in Paris were built from the dismantled set of an opera. The revolutionaries had no wood, so they looted the theater. Imagine shouting liberty while standing on a fake staircase, meant for a soprano. History is nothing if not dramatic. So why are they protesting this time? The king, Charles the Bax, has dissolved Parliament. Again, he's trying to turn back the clock, to strip the press of freedom, to rechain the people to divine right and powdered nonsense. And the people of Paris, they are so over it. You dodge musket fire. You slip into a cafe where ink-stained men argue over Rousseau and breakfast. The pastry's stale, but the anger's fresh. A woman in a blood-spattered apron slams her hands on the table. My son died in July of '89 for this? She spits. It's personal now. You wander into a bookshop that's been converted into a medic station. The owner, balding and serene, reads aloud from Voltaire between changing bandages. Outside, more gunshots. Inside, philosophy and gauze. That's Paris for you. And then, like a painting crashing to the ground, the king flees. Abdicates. Another bourbon gone. But wait. The people didn't ask for another monarch, and yet they get one anyway. Louis Philippe, the so-called citizen king. He wears simple clothes. He walks the streets. He nods and waves. But protest, it doesn't sleep. By 1848, the people are back. Another king, another barricade. Paris just keeps remixing its rage. You lie low in a student's attic during the June Days Uprising. He offers you stale wine and an idealistic pamphlet. The world can be fair, he says, blinking through tears. He has no shoes. His rifle's older than he is. Historians still debate whether these insurrections were revolutions or tragic theater. But you can't deny the rhythm. Protest in Paris moves like an orchestra. Swells, pauses, crashes, rises again. You move forward again, 1871 this time, and walk straight into the Paris Commune. This is protest in its purest, strangest form. The people take over the city. Literally. Workers, artists, exiles. For 72 days, they run things. They open schools, reorganize work, burn church records, rename everything. You watch a man paint over a street sign. Rue de l'Église becomes Rue de la Révolution Permanente. Dramatic? Yes, but also sincere. Of course, it doesn't last. The government returns with soldiers, with cannons. They crush the commune in a single bloody week. It's called La Semaine Sanglante, the Bloody Week. bodies in the gutters, books burning in the streets. Even the trees seem stunned. And here's the whisper you won't find in most history books. The last communards were executed at dawn in Père Lachaise Cemetery. Some believe their ghosts still whisper among the tombstones. Protest, even when silenced, refuses to disappear. You sit beneath the shade of a battered statue of Marianne, the symbol of the French Republic, her face half erased by bullet marks. Children play nearby, oblivious. But you know, Paris is not just the city of lights. It's the city of protest. It doesn't break. It smolders, reforms, and sings again. Tonight, you curl up in a dusty garret above a bookstore, hearing the faint echo of songs once sung behind barricades built from love letters and overturned pianos. Rebellion isn't always victory, but it is always music. Smoke still clings to your clothes from the Paris barricades, but the air shifts. It grows warmer, thicker. You're not in Europe anymore. You're wading through tall sugar cane under a moon that doesn't care who owns the land. This is the Caribbean, and it is burning. You're in Saint-Domingue, now known as Haiti, the richest colony in the New World, and the cruelest. The sugar here glistens. It funds mansions in Bordeaux and silks in Versailles. But that sweetness? It's blood sugar. And the people harvesting it are not people in the eyes of the law. They are enslaved, branded, broken. Until quietly, fiercely, they're not. It begins with whispers. As always, Vodou drums beat in the dark. Not a party, a message, a gathering. The kind of night that turns fear into fury. You're standing on the edge of Bois Caimont in 1791. There's a secret ceremony happening, led by a priest or maybe a priestess. Historians still argue about the details. Some claim a pig was sacrificed. Others say prayers were whispered in a mix of languages, Creole, Fawn, French, each syllable another chain breaking. And then suddenly, plantations start burning. It spreads like wildfire. 'Cause it is wildfire. Slaves, no. Revolutionaries rise across the island. Some wield machetes. Others use tools meant for harvesting, now turned toward freedom. You walk beside them as they chant, some barefoot, some in rags, none of them waiting for permission. And leading them, eventually, is a man named Toussaint Louverture. Born enslaved, educated in secret, a military genius who teaches himself tactics by reading French Enlightenment pamphlets while tending horses. He turns protest into strategy, rebellion into revolution. And here's something wild. During the uprising, there were moments when Louverture allied with the Spanish, then the French, then turned again, all in service of one aim: abolishing slavery, whatever it took. Historians still argue whether he was idealist or pragmatist. But does it matter when your whole country is on fire for freedom? France abolishes slavery under revolutionary pressure. But then Napoleon comes to power and, you guessed it, he tries to bring it back. You feel the island hold its breath. And then it erupts again. This time, it ends differently. You're there on January 1st, 1804. Haiti declares independence. The first nation born of a successful slave revolt. You can barely believe it. The sugarcane fields are quiet for a moment, and the night smells like soil and gunpowder, and something else, something free. But protest didn't die there. Far from it. In Jamaica, slave revolts spark over time, like coals refusing to go out. You walk with Samuel Sharp in 1831, a literate preacher who organizes a general strike disguised as a Christmas holiday. That's right, a Christmas protest. He asks people not to work, not to fight, just to stop. But of course, the British authorities panic. Troops are sent, Fires ignite, over 500 are killed, and Sharp is hanged. Still, just 2 years later, Britain abolishes slavery across the empire. You can argue politics, economics, but you were there. You know what pushed the scale. And here's a whisper from the fringe. Some Caribbean protesters used plant-based poisons as resistance. They'd lace meals with crushed seeds, not to kill, but to sicken overseers. Just enough to disrupt. It wasn't just machetes. It was leaves, roots, silence. Even today, people argue over what Vodou's role really was. Was it religion? Resistance? A code? Maybe all three. Maybe none. But when you hear those drums, deep, pulsing, earthy, you understand something older than books. You see women, too. Central. Bold. Not just followers. Organizers. Some dressed in white, leading prayer. Others armed and barefoot in the mud. And one, reportedly, a general, Sanité Belair. Shot for leading troops. But her name still ripples. You watch her disappear into mist, but the imprint stays. Protest here is more than rage. It's rhythm. It's soil. It's spiritual. The land doesn't forget the hands that bled into it. And even centuries later, when Haiti is punished with sanctions and isolation for daring to be free, the people still march, still sing, still hold their heads high. You curl up under a banana tree, the air thick with night creatures and jasmine, and listen to the wind carry the echoes of those first chants, half song, half warning. Freedom doesn't beg. It burns its name into the sugar. You're still on the move, but now the sky has dimmed with soot, and the air tastes metallic. There's no jungle here, just chimneys, coal smoke, and the sound of gears grinding endlessly. Welcome to England. Welcome to the Industrial Revolution, where protest doesn't wear war paint or brandish machetes. It carries a wrench and a cough. You walk down a cobbled lane in Manchester, 1812. The fog is not romantic. It's lung-clogging. Everything around you is gray, except the sharp red of a child's scarf, probably knitted by her own hands. She's been in the mill since sunrise. That mill? A monster. Looms the size of wagons, cotton dust thick as flour. And over there, a boy missing half his fingers. No accident report filed. Just a shrug and another shift. You enter the mill, ducking the clatter. It's deafening. Every step is a heartbeat in iron. But then, silence. Or rather, the absence of production. Machines have been smashed. Cloth lies tangled like wounded animals. You've just witnessed a visit from the Luddites. Yes, those Luddites. You've heard the term misused. Tech haters, they say. But they weren't afraid of machines. They were afraid of being replaced. And worse, of being forgotten. So they protested the only way the law would hear, with hammers. Led by the mythical General Ned Ludd, who may or may not have existed, they moved at night. Disguised, deliberate. They didn't loot. They didn't riot. They destroyed specific machines in specific factories, making a statement with every shattered cog. Historians still argue whether it was economic terrorism or desperate justice. But you know better. You saw the child's fingers. The British government didn't exactly take it well. In fact, they sent more troops to crush the Luddites than were fighting Napoleon. That's how scared they were of a few smashed looms. You pass a scaffold where 3 men are to be hanged, executed for frame breaking. One holds a hymn book. The other holds nothing. The third just stares. That stare says everything. Still, protest here doesn't die with a noose. It just changes outfits. You walk into a meeting in a pub, packed with workers muttering about wages, hours, the price of bread. They pass around a paper with trembling hands. The People's Charter. 6 demands: universal male suffrage, secret ballots, pay for MPs. It's a blueprint for democracy, and a wish list carved from soot. You've entered the world of the Chartists. They rally in fields, sign petitions with 1 million names. One march draws crowds so large, birds stop flying overhead, confused by the sheer volume of breath. The government shudders and waits, but the petition is rejected 3 times. Still, the impact is undeniable. You sit beside a weaver's wife as she boils water and teaches her children the words of the charter. "We may not win," she says softly, "but we don't go silent." In the background, someone starts to sing, a protest song disguised as a lullaby. That's how they did it, turning rebellion into melody. And did you know? Some Chartist women embroidered slogans into their corsets. That's right, lace and leather and political rage, right under their petticoats. Fringe history with flair. You wander into a mine next. It's black as a swallowed scream. Men crawl on hands and knees, lungs filling with fire dust. A child hands you a pickaxe. He's 7. "No one listens when we speak," he says. "But maybe they'll listen when we stop working." And they do. Strikes erupt. Some peaceful, some brutal. You're there during the 1842 general strike, when factories grind to a halt across the north. You pass men with empty stomachs and full hearts. One writes on a wall with chalk, "We ask not for bread, but for justice." You write next to him, "Both would be nice." Still, the bosses push back. Lockouts, arrests, violence, and yet change comes. Slow, reluctant, but real. The workday gets shorter. Wages rise. Children eventually leave the mines for schoolrooms, not because of mercy, because of protest. Even now, you pass a factory wall where someone's carved the word "resist" in grease and nail polish. You lie down near a cooling boiler, the warmth fading under your coat, and listen to the hiss of steam. Machines still hum in the distance, but over them, you hear something else. Voices. Ragged, tired, and singing. Because even in a world of iron, protests finds its rhythm. You awaken to chalk dust and the clink of iron. The year's unclear. It flickers between decades. But the smell? It's unmistakable. Sweat, ink, and punishment. You're standing at a crossroads between classrooms and chain gangs. Because protest isn't just about burning things or toppling kings. It's about refusing the life someone else assigned to you. You're in the American South now. The dirt roads are long, the fields wide, and the power structures deeper than roots. It's the late 1800s, and you walk beside a man in a striped uniform, dragging a sledgehammer toward a rail line. He's barely 30, but the chains around his ankles rattle like he's centuries old. His crime: vagrancy, or talking back, or simply being black and unemployed. You've stumbled into the convict lease system. After slavery ended, many southern states found new ways to keep bodies working for free. They arrested thousands, men, women, children, on minor charges, then leased them to companies. Railroads, farms, mines, prisons became profit centers, and protest. It was survival. You watch a group of prisoners refuse to eat. Their silent strike lasts 2 days before guards force-feed them grits with a stick. Later, one scrawls a message in coal dust on the wall. "You can break my body. You already broke the law." Historians still debate how organized these early prison protests were. But one thing's clear. You don't need a union card to know when you're being crushed. You follow one prisoner's story. He teaches others to read in secret, using a Bible with half the pages torn out. Every new word learned is a tiny rebellion. Every shared sentence, a mutiny. But walk north, and the scene shifts. It's a university campus, but the dorms are freezing, and the books are political grenades. You're in the thick of the early 20th century, when students across the world start to realize that knowledge isn't neutral. You lean over a young man's shoulder as he writes his first protest flyer. It's got typos, a wine stain, and more fire than sense. But it spreads. You watch student movements flare up in Mexico, Japan, Russia. Protests over fees, over censorship, over war, over being told what truth is supposed to look like. Some of them are slapstick, like the infamous pillow fight protests in Paris, where students in pajamas pelt administrators with feathers and philosophy. Fringe fact: one university dean reportedly slipped on a rogue slipper and cracked a rib. It made the papers, kind of. But many protests are deadly serious. In 1960, 4 black college students sit at a whites-only Woolworth's lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina. They don't shout, don't move, just sit. You sit beside them now, the vinyl seat sticky under your legs. The waitress refuses to serve you. Someone behind you calls you names you thought were extinct, but you stay. That stillness, it's louder than rage. That moment sparks a wave, sit-ins, teach-ins, walkouts. Entire cafeterias turned into battlefields of silence. And here's a detail you might have missed. During many of these sit-ins, protesters were trained not to flinch. They practiced having milkshakes dumped on their heads, insults spat in their faces, fists raised to their jaws so they could resist without reacting. Protest as performance, as discipline, as control. You visit Columbia University in 1968. Students seize a building, not just to shout, but to question everything. Vietnam, racism, institutional power. You find a typewriter abandoned on the floor. The last page in it reads, "This is not just about war. This is about worth." Outside, riot police gather. Inside, students sing, argue, kiss, cry. Someone's reciting Camus. Someone else is trying to hotwire a vending machine. It's messy, honest, and unforgettable. And while you're drifting between these student revolts, you realize something. Every generation thinks they're the first to be angry, but they're not. They're part of a chain, a syllabus of defiance passed down like contraband. Even in totalitarian regimes, students find ways. In 1939, Czech university students protest Nazi occupation. Their leaders are executed. Their university shut down. In response, students around the world declare November 17th International Students' Day. It's still honored today. Quietly, boldly, and perhaps the strangest echo, in Tiananmen Square, 1989, you stand with 1 million students in the heat, surrounded by banners, poetry, makeshift democracy walls. The mood swings between hope and dread. A student carves a phrase into a pillar. We want a future. The tanks come anyway. You don't need to see the end to understand the message. Whether in a cell or classroom, protest grows wherever there's the urge to think freely and the courage to say it out loud. So tonight, you lie down on a stiff dorm bed, textbooks for a pillow, chalk still under your fingernails. Somewhere, another student is doing the same. Somewhere, another prisoner is humming a song that isn't allowed. And somewhere inside you, quiet, steady, there's the knowledge that protest doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes, it looks like a question no one's supposed to ask. The chalk fades into the petals of white roses. The cobblestones under your feet return, but they feel softened now, worn by more than wheels and boots. A breeze moves through the city like a whisper of change, rustling the hems of skirts and the sashes of 1,000 women. You're in London, 1910, The woman beside you wears violet, white, and green. A suffragette, gloved hand clenched around a sign that reads, "Deeds, not words." Welcome to the Women's March that rattled an empire. Around you, the crowd swells. Sashes flash like signal flags. Violet for dignity, white for purity, green for hope. It's a protest, yes, but it's also spectacle. Choreographed defiance. Discipline in petticoats. The scent in the air is lavender soap, ironed linen, and the ink of hastily written leaflets. And beneath it all, the quiet hum of resolve hardened into steel. The woman beside you? Arrested twice. Once for shattering a department store window with a rock wrapped in a manifesto. Once for chaining herself to Parliament's gates until her voice was heard, or her wrists bled. You ask her if she's afraid. She doesn't flinch. "Always," she says, "but I'm angrier." You walk through the heart of Edwardian London, past jeering men and stone-faced officers. The women march anyway. Hats pinned tight, eyes unblinking, boots worn from pacing the same blocks again and again. A city used to ruling now feels the tremor of the ruled rising. But protest isn't porcelain. It cracks. Some suffragettes grow tired of patience. They turn militant. They drop homemade bombs into empty post boxes, slash masterpieces in galleries, cut telephone wires in the dark. One even tries to burn down a cricket pavilion just to prove they exist. The message is clear. If you won't hear our voices, you will see the smoke. You visit a prison. Holloway, cold stone and colder rules. A place where silence is punishment and resistance is labeled madness. Inside, the women on hunger strike lie pale on iron beds. When they refuse food, the state answers with tubes, straps, force, rubber gags, bruises along the jaw. They call it medicine. It feels like torture. You touch a cell wall. A woman carved a line into the stone with the edge of a broken spoon. Votes for women, starve for dignity. And still, they do not stop. Emily Wilding Davison doesn't stop. In 1913, she steps into the thundering path of the King's Horse at the Epsom Derby. Some say she meant to die. Others believe she only meant to hang a sash around the reins. What's certain? She is trampled. She never wakes. Her funeral floods London in black veils and suffragette banners. The silence that day is louder than any speech, martyrdom sewn into the seams of history. But this fire doesn't burn in Britain alone. You blink, and now you're in America. Washington, D.C., 19 to 17. Women in coats and calm faces stand before the White House gates. They hold signs like blades. Mr. President, how long must women wait for liberty? They don't shout. They stand still. That silence? It shakes the building behind them. You see Lucy Burns, arrested, jailed at the Occoquan workhouse. Her hands are bound. Her stomach is empty. When they force feed her, she bites the tubes. When they beat her, she writes speeches on soap and hides them in her clothing. Protest survives in every margin. Here's a detail they don't teach you in school. Burns once tied herself to the cell bars by her wrists for an entire night, bleeding, trembling, but unbowed. And still, not every woman is allowed a place in the line. Black suffragists march too, but they're told to walk at the back. In 1913, Ida B. Wells is told to step aside. She doesn't. She steps forward. Proud, uninvited, unstoppable. Her protest is a double-edged sword, not just against men, but against the women who wanted progress. But not too much of it. You cross oceans now. New Zealand, 1893. A world away, yet the same current pulses. Kate Shepherd's face will one day appear on a banknote. But today, She's just a woman with a petition 3 feet long, signed by thousands. Maori women too rise, not just for suffrage, but for land, language, and life. They win the vote, the first nation to do so, but victory is rarely universal. Representation, real inclusive power, remains rationed. In Russia, 1917, you walk among textile workers in Petrograd. It's International Women's Day. They strike for bread, for peace, for their children. Their march ignites a revolution. Days later, the Tsar abdicates, not from rifle fire, but from the pressure of women's feet pounding frozen streets. Sometimes protest carries a rifle. Sometimes it carries a baby in one arm and a loaf of bread in the other. You fast forward through time like flipping through torn pages. France, 1944. Women finally cast votes in a land where they'd long been muse, not citizen. Switzerland, 1971, the last in Europe to grant national suffrage. Saudi Arabia, 2015. The ballot box opens, narrowly, hesitantly. Every milestone, paid for in footsteps, hunger, isolation, and ink. And today you walk beside women in Tehran, hair exposed, eyes fierce, chants ripple like electricity. Zan, Zendagi, Azadi, woman, life, freedom. They burn hijabs not in hatred, but in hope. Not against faith, but against control. And you look down. In your hand, a white rose. Still. Defiant. The same color as the banners once pinned to Edwardian sashes. The same color as the chalk on the prison floor. The same white that once signaled silence, but now speaks volumes. You press it into a crack in the wall. Not a monument, just a mark. Quiet. Certain. Because protest doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it walks in gloves and satin, an unshakable calm. Sometimes it's soap hidden in hems. Sometimes it's a rose that refuses to fall. Number O. The rose fades. The wind sharpens. And now it's snowing. You're walking through Petrograd, 1917. The river Neva is frozen solid. The streets are wide and cold, lined with gray buildings and thinner hope. But something stirs beneath the frost. Russia is about to burst. It doesn't begin with the Bolsheviks. Not yet. It begins, as it so often does, with women. February, International Women's Day. The factories are humming, but not happily. The lines for bread twist like veins through the streets. Prices have tripled. The Tsar is away and the people are hungry. In stomach, in spirit, so they march. Thousands of women from textile mills and bakeries and muddy homes. They bang pots. They shout, bread, peace. The men are surprised. The police hesitate. You stand at the edge of the crowd as snow mixes with ash. It's quiet, then loud. Soldiers are ordered to fire. Some do, some don't. Some lower their guns and join the crowd. You see a young conscript drop his rifle, pick up a sign, and walk beside a woman twice his age, like they were born in the same minute. You feel it. History shifting underfoot like a fault line. Historians still argue whether this uprising was planned or accidental. But what's undeniable is that it worked. The Tsar abdicates. The Romanov dynasty crumbles like stale pastry. But protest doesn't end with victory. That's the trap. Soon Lenin arrives in a sealed train from Germany. You watch the Bolsheviks rise. Promises scrawled in red ink. Land to peasants, power to workers, peace to soldiers. Sounds good, until it doesn't. You walk through Red Square during the early days of Soviet control. There's new paint on the walls, new slogans, new flags, but also new silences, the kind that feel rehearsed. You whisper a joke about the revolution, and someone flinches. It's not fear of God now, it's fear of the state. You wander into a small village in Ukraine. where peasants hoard grain against state requisition. A protest of necessity. They hide sacks in cellars, beneath floorboards, even inside hollowed-out logs. One woman bakes loaves with stones inside to make them look whole. A cruel, brilliant trick. Later, they'll call it the Holodomor. Man-made famine. Millions will die. And yet, someone still scratches a message into a barn wall. We are not beasts. You run your fingers over the grooves. Still sharp. Back in the city, students and artists protest in subtler ways. They write poems with too many meanings, paint portraits with one eye closed. A theater troupe stages a version of Hamlet where the ghost wears a red military cap. Everyone laughs nervously. No one mentions it afterward. Fringe detail? There was a short-lived cafe in 1920s Moscow called the Comrades' Cup. It served bitter coffee and hosted satirical poetry nights until it mysteriously burned down. Probably coincidence, probably not. Even as the USSR tightens, protest adapts. It hides in symphonies, in graffiti scratched into bus seats, in the margins of banned books, where someone underlined a line from Dostoevsky. To live without hope is to cease to live. You walk past a gulag now deep in Siberia. Prisoners are singing, not loud but layered, a mournful tune about snow and lost shoes. One prisoner has sewn a message into his coat hem with threads pulled from his blanket. It simply reads, I was here. Even exile becomes protest. You meet dissidents in kitchens, samizdat literature copied by hand, passed from palm to palm. Typewriters muffled with blankets to hide the click-clack rhythm. You sit with them. You help fold the pages. And then you jump ahead. It's the 1980s, and a group of Soviet mothers holds photographs of their missing sons. The Afghanistan war drags on. The government stays silent, but the mothers don't. They stand outside ministries, unblinking, holding their grief like shields. Their protest is maternal and immovable. Historians still debate how much they affected policy, but the soldiers noticed, the newspapers noticed, the world noticed. By 1991, the Soviet Union collapses, not with a bang, but with a sigh. A tired system worn down by silence, lies, and endless quiet acts of defiance. You sit beneath the statue of Pushkin in Moscow. The snow lighter now, the wind less cruel. Someone has tied a red ribbon to the poet's wrist. Another silent protest. Another whisper in the storm. Because Russia has never really stopped protesting. It just hides its voice in strange places. In onion-domed churches, in underground music, in the way a babushka folds her scarf just so before lighting a candle. You close your eyes. The frost kisses your eyelashes. And the silence around you? It's not peace. It's a breath held. A pause before the next word. You step out of the snow and into the soft, humid night of the American South. It smells like magnolias, gasoline, and something heavier. Something like history that hasn't finished happening yet. You're walking through Montgomery, Alabama, 1955, and you're not alone. Footsteps echo beside you. Slow, firm, deliberate. A woman in a stiff coat and hat refuses to give up her seat. Her name is Rosa. Her silence is louder than a riot. You see her hands rest gently in her lap. She doesn't raise her voice, doesn't flinch. The bus driver is shouting, white-knuckled, but she doesn't move. And with that stillness, something shifts. The Montgomery bus boycott begins. You walk through it with shoes worn thin from miles of pavement. No one rides the buses anymore. Not the cooks, not the nurses, not the teachers or janitors. They walk, in heels, in dress shoes, in Sunday best. Some even ride mules. One old woman tells you, My feet is tired, but my soul is rested. That line stays with you. This is protest braided with dignity. They don't throw bricks. They throw patience, day after day. For over a year, you're there at one of the mass meetings. The church hums with bodies and sweat and purpose. A young preacher takes the podium. His voice trembles, not with fear, but power. His name is Martin. You see the crowd hang on every word. There are no weapons here, just truth. Sharper than steel, but it wasn't all quiet. You flash back to Birmingham, 1963. Fire hoses blast children against walls. Police dogs unleashed. You wince. One girl gets back up. She's maybe 12. Her dress is ripped. Her eyes are steady. You follow her into the jail cell where she sings a freedom song, thin but defiant. That's how they did it. Songs and sermons, marches and sit-ins, protest woven into the rhythms of church choirs and front porches. And it wasn't just men. You meet Fannie Lou Hamer, giving testimony in front of white men who try not to blink. She talks about being sterilized without consent, about being beaten in jail, about the right to vote. She ends with, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." You don't forget that voice. No one does. The fringe details? They're fierce. In Jackson, Mississippi, protesters held mock funerals for segregation, coffins filled with burned textbooks and broken signs. In another town, people boycotted white businesses by filling their carts with food and walking out just before paying. Silent sabotage, respectful revenge. You travel north to Chicago and Detroit. The protests don't wear church clothes here. They wear leather and walk with a different rhythm. You meet Malcolm. Sharp, brilliant, dangerous to power. He speaks in syllables that snap like fingers. By any means necessary. You feel the shift. This isn't just protest. It's a reckoning. The marches grow bigger. Selma, Washington, Memphis. You're there when King speaks. I have a dream. You don't need a history book. You're watching tears slide down strangers' cheeks. You're watching a man build a mountain out of words, and the whole world climbs it. And yet, they kill him. April 1968. A bullet? A balcony? Silence. But even in grief, the movement does not die. In fact, you walk beside a different kind of protest now. One with afros and raised fists. You're in Oakland, California. Black Panthers are patrolling neighborhoods. Not with weapons, but with cameras, food programs, education. Protest turned practical. One fringe story says the Panthers once delivered groceries to over 1,000 homes in 1 week. Another says they shadowed police patrols with law books, quoting rights at every corner. You believe both. Protest is evolving. Still righteous, still dangerous, but more layered now, more streetwise, more revolutionary. And then you find yourself at the edge of a concert stage. A voice rises. Aretha. She's singing Respect, and every woman in the crowd is singing it back. Protest has moved into music. You follow that song through Motown, into hip-hop, into gospel remixes and remix tapes. Lyrics become manifestos. Beats become marches. And through it all, Jim Crow dies. Slowly, dragging its feet. The Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, signs come down, laws change. But you know, it's not finished. It's never finished. Because protest here was never just about a seat on the bus or a ballot box. It was about being seen, about being counted, about being able to say, I am here and I am staying. Tonight, you rest beneath a pecan tree in Georgia. The night is humid, but gentle. A cricket chirps near your ear. In the distance, someone's singing. Low, steady, ancient. It's not a hymn. It's history. The hymn fades into incense, guitars, the soft tremble of protest wrapped in flowers. You open your eyes in 1968. Everything is hazy. Maybe it's the smoke. Maybe it's the times. You're not sure where you are first. San Francisco? Paris? Prague? Mexico City? Answer: yes. It's the year the world seems to rise up all at once. And the protests. They smell like jasmine and gasoline. You start in California, walking barefoot across Haight-Ashbury. You dodge tie-dye shirts and sidewalk poetry. Make love, not war is graffitied onto every lamppost. The summer of love is technically over, but the scent lingers: patchouli, rebellion, and cheap wine. But under the flowers, the rage simmers. Vietnam, that's the heartbeat of this protest wave, and you feel it most on college campuses, where students aren't just arguing, they're shouting, marching, burning draft cards like sacred offerings. You watch one kid fold his card with trembling fingers before tossing it into the flames. His hand doesn't stop shaking. He's 18, too young to vote, but old enough to die. And then you're at Kent State 2 years later. The grass is dewy. The air is thick. National Guardsmen stand in a line, too stiff, too young. You see them open fire. 4 students fall. One girl is screaming over a body that doesn't move. It feels like the dream of peace just woke up and broke a tooth on reality. But 1968 doesn't stop for grief. You're in Paris next. Cobblestones fly through the air like questions without answers. Students occupy the Sorbonne, write manifestos, paint slogans on walls in lipstick and spray paint. Beneath the cobblestones, the beach. That one sticks with you. They tear up pavement in the Latin Quarter, not just to fight the police, but to dig down, to find something soft under all this hardness. Historians still argue what they wanted exactly. Reform? Revolution? A romantic riot? Maybe all three. You duck into a side street and find a mime writing a poem on a crumbling wall with a piece of charcoal. Another fringe protest? Silent theater. No permits needed. The police respond with tear gas. You respond by holding someone's hand as you both run. Then, Mexico City. You're in Tlatelolco Plaza on October 2nd. Thousands of students have gathered. Peaceful, organized, full of hope. The speeches are thoughtful. The air buzzes with nervous possibility. Then the gunfire starts. Chaos, screams, people leaping into fountains, into alleyways, into silence. The government blames the students. The truth is buried with the dead. You sit on the edge of a rooftop and watch the plaza empty. Stillness again, but the flame doesn't die. It flickers, migrates. You follow it to Berlin, where youth protest against the Vietnam War and the growing police state. To Tokyo, where students occupy campuses and clash with riot squads under banners written in English and kanji. To Prague, where Alexander Dubček promises socialism with a human face. For a moment, it feels like it might work. You stand in Wenceslas Square, listening to voices singing Czech folk songs in defiance of Soviet tanks. Then the tanks arrive. Protesters sit down in front of them, offer flowers, hold mirrors up to the soldiers. One man sets himself on fire in the square. His name is John Palash. His silence burns louder than speeches. Protest in 1968 is no longer a thing that happens. It's a thing that is. It moves like a language spoken across borders. You're in Chicago next. The Democratic National Convention. You see Abby Hoffman in an American flag shirt, tossing jokes like grenades. You see police charge into crowds with batons. You hear the chant, "The whole world is watching." And it is. The cameras roll. The blood is recorded. The arrests stack up like chairs in an empty hall. But even in the worst moments, protest adapts. You meet activists who smuggle cassette tapes across borders. Others pass pamphlets written in code. In one case, a university uses a mimeographed exam sheet to hide a call to protest on the back page. Yes, a final exam becomes a manifesto. By the end of the year, the world hasn't changed the way they wanted. Martin Luther King Jr., dead. Robert F. Kennedy, dead. Cities smoldering. But you lie down in the grass behind a student dorm somewhere in Michigan or Marseille or Moscow. You're not sure anymore. The sky's the same everywhere when you're tired. And you think, maybe protest didn't win in 1968, but it did live. It bloomed. In awkward, angry, beautiful ways. In sandals and miniskirts. In Molotov cocktails and poetry slams. In the nerve to scream in public and the grace to whisper change in private. Tonight, you hear the echo in the wind, a guitar string, a chant, the sound of someone choosing to care out loud. The music dims, replaced by the steady grind of tanks on concrete. The air sharpens, less flour, more fire. You're in Prague again, but it's 1969 now and the songs have quieted. The Soviet boots stayed. The dreams didn't. Still, you feel something crackle. Then, flash forward. The street signs change language. The buildings grow square, gray, cautious. You've arrived in Poland, 1980. Shipyards, cranes, steel girders slicing the sky. Gdansk. Here, protest starts with a priest and a paint can. You watch a man, grizzled and quiet, write Solidarność across a factory wall. Not with permission, not in secret, just openly with stubborn rhythm. Solidarity. His name is Lech Wałęsa, and he's about to lead the biggest labor protest in Cold War history. You stand with the dock workers as they lock themselves into the shipyards, not to destroy but to preserve, to demand something more human. They sing, they pray, they pass around sandwiches and leaflets. This is protest as community, as communion. And this time it spreads. Across Poland, workers walk off the job. Farmers stop farming. Even teachers stop teaching the approved history and begin whispering the real one. You visit a printing press operating out of a church basement. They use hair dryers to dry ink and smuggle paper under coats. One issue of their underground newspaper is made entirely from purloined toilet paper. Fringe fact, but true. You smile. But the regime doesn't. Martial law is declared. Soldiers fill the streets. The Solidarity leaders are arrested. The press is seized. But you've seen this before. Protest doesn't vanish. It goes quiet, into bedrooms, into churches, into songs sung so gently you'd think they were lullabies. You step into one of those churches, Wrocław maybe. A priest is giving a sermon that is technically about the Good Samaritan, but really it's about resistance. Everyone knows. No one says it. You blink and you're in East Berlin, 1989. Graffiti on every flat wall. Wir sind das Volk. We are the people. The Berlin Wall looms, tired now. You touch it? It's colder than you imagined, covered in paint, in names, in protest. You follow a candlelight vigil to a square. There are no chants, no flags, just light, just people. And then slowly the wall is breached, not with violence, but with hands and hammers and dancing feet. It falls. You feel it fall in your chest, not with a bang, but with a cheer. Now you're in South Korea in the same year. Seoul erupts in protest. Students demanding democracy. They link arms. They wear headbands with slogans inked in blood-red paint. You hear screams, then singing. Then both at once. They bring down a military dictatorship with sheer pressure, with presence, with persistence. Then you blink, and now you're in South Africa. It's 1985. The apartheid state is still strong. still brutal, but resistance is everywhere. You walk through a township as young boys throw rocks at armored vehicles. Their mothers, organizing consumer boycotts. Their fathers, leading secret meetings. The churches, again, are alive with whisper chants and coded sermons. You sit in a shack with 5 teenagers who've all memorized Invictus. One recites it slowly like a prayer. I am the master of my fate. He doesn't believe it yet, but he says it anyway. Then you see them, Desmond Tutu, Winnie Mandela, ordinary teachers and students, facing down riot police with only their eyes. You feel the weight of it. And in a hidden room, under a flickering light bulb, a young artist draws protest posters. Simple, sharp. One shows a raised fist gripping a flower. Another, a child's silhouette inside barbed wire. No words, just truths. The world notices, sanctions, pressure, international protest, layers over the domestic. And one day, one long, long day, Nelson Mandela walks out of prison. You hear the cheering ripple like thunder. But here's the thing. The protest didn't end when he walked out, because protest never ends when the cameras stop. You sit on a balcony in Cape Town, watching the city exhale. A girl below you is sketching something on her backpack. A heart? A fist? A mountain? Maybe all 3. You realize this wasn't just a season of protest. It was a century, a crescendo that played from Prague to Pretoria, and the beat still lingers in your chest. Tonight, you lie on a wooden bench beside a cracked statue. It's missing a hand, probably vandalized, or maybe liberated. The stars are quiet, but not still, because protest, like constellations, is only visible when the lights go out. The statue fades behind you, and the night begins to hum, not with drums or slogans, but with electricity. Neon signs flicker, screens glow in windows. You're no longer in the past, not quite. You're in the liminal space of the late 1990s and early 2000s, where protest slips into a new disguise. Digital threads, underground choirs, coded songs. Welcome to South Africa's uneasy rebirth, and beyond it, to a world where resistance hums beneath the surface. You're back in the townships for a moment. Post-apartheid now. Apartheid is legally over, but the pain isn't gone. Economic inequality yawns like a canyon. Electricity remains unreliable. The walls are painted with victory slogans. Amandla. Freedom. But the paint is chipping, so protest shifts. Again. You walk through Cape Town during a service delivery protest. Young people block roads not with guns, but with trash bins. Tires burn, not for violence, but for attention. The chant is simple. Where is the promise? A woman with 2 missing teeth looks you in the eye and says, "We were free on paper, but the paper caught fire." And then, something beautiful. You enter a shack filled with song. Not sad, not even angry, just defiantly joyful. Protest as survival. A cappella choirs rising from corrugated roofs like smoke. Fringe fact, in some townships, entire choirs form just to create music about local corruption. Literal harmony in Dissent. But now the rhythm changes. You're drawn northeast, to Myanmar, to Thailand, to Hong Kong. The signs aren't hand-painted anymore. They're typed, formatted, exported as PDFs. Protesters now Google each other. They meme. They mask up, not just from tear gas, but facial recognition. You're in Yangon 2007. A line of saffron robes moves through the streets. The Saffron Revolution, they'll call it. Monks marching in silence, holding nothing but their bowls. And it rattles the regime harder than bullets. Because protest in Myanmar, you see, wears humility as armor. They chant the Metta Sutta. May all beings be free from suffering. And for a moment, even the riot police falter. You're standing at a crossroads where religion and resistance meet, where robes become uniforms, where blessings become battle cries. And then suddenly, Tehran, 2009, the Green Movement. You're in a sea of people holding their phones up like torches. Their mouths are taped shut. Protest signs read, "Where is my vote?" The air tastes like burning rubber and stolen hope. At night, people lean out of their apartment windows and chant Allahu Akbar into the darkness, over and over, just like during the 1979 revolution. But now it's not for a theocracy. It's for choice, for voice. Historians still argue whether the Green Movement failed or merely folded. But you heard the echo, and it's still bouncing off the windows. You leap now, propelled by Wi-Fi and rage, into Hong Kong, 2019. You're on Nathan Road, 10,000 umbrellas open at once. Not for rain, for cover, for resistance. They call it the umbrella movement. You walk through clouds of tear gas. Protesters pass water bottles, goggles, cling wrap. One girl wraps her arms around a traffic cone. She's covering a gas canister to keep it from burning anyone nearby. There's no leader, just a swarm, a network, a spirit. Their messages flash across Telegram, encrypted, self-deleting. Posters appear overnight using QR codes. A protester in a Pikachu costume dances beside a line of riot police. You blink, unsure if it's comedy or courage. It's both. Fringe moment. Someone turns an IKEA instruction manual into a protest guide. How to dismantle injustice. Step 1. Be many. But not all is playful. You watch arrests in the shadows. Detainees disappear. Fear creeps back in. Still, the lights from their phone screens glimmer like stars on asphalt. You're scrolling now, through the merge Me Too, through Gimri BLM, through threads and hashtags that link grief in Minneapolis to fists in Tokyo, to candles in Lagos. You're watching digital protest, viral defiance, and it's working. Sort of. It reaches farther, moves faster, but burns out quicker too. A firework and a bonfire, both. Loud, then gone. Or maybe just quiet, hiding. You're in Nigeria 2020. The Burj Ensar's protests explode. Young people flood the streets, dancing, filming, tweeting. It's both party and protest. They raise money with crypto, feed each other, clean up trash after rallies. The government turns violent. The Lekki Tollgate massacre happens, live, online. And even though the internet is shut down, the world saw enough. One protester posts a single sentence before going silent. We wanted to live. You stand in the silence afterward, scrolling, reading, numb. And yet, somewhere else, another protest begins. Because protest now is everywhere. It's art, it's code. It's a digital campfire where the discontented gather in pixels, plot in emoji, and scream through screens. Tonight, you sit at a rooftop in Seoul. A projection lights up the side of a skyscraper, an anti-corruption slogan in glowing Hangul. Below, no one stops, but no one forgets. And as the city hums, you realize this. In the digital age, protest wears new clothes, but its heart is ancient. A beat, a whisper, a push, a refusal to stay quiet, even when the whole world hits mute. The glow of LED signs softens. The hashtags dissolve. You blink, and the streets turn to farmland. You're no longer watching screens. You're standing in mud, next to a tractor that smells like diesel and defiance. Welcome to the modern countryside, where protest doesn't come with tech conferences and startup slang. It comes with calloused hands, livestock, and a slow, steady fury. You're in India now. 2020. The largest protest in recorded human history is unfolding. and almost no one in the West sees it at first. You're walking alongside a river of farmers, men with turbans, women in saris, children with sunburned cheeks. Some rode in on tractors. Others walked for days. They've surrounded the capital, pitched tents along highways, built communal kitchens. You're handed tea within minutes. Protest here isn't a riot, it's a village. The issue? New farm laws passed without consultation. They fear their land, their lifeblood, will be swallowed by corporations, so they refuse to move for over a year. One fringe detail: they built their own libraries in the protest camps, rows of books beside sacks of rice. Resistance. With reading glasses, you attend a poetry night under tarps flapping in the monsoon wind. A man recites verses about wheat and dignity. The crowd snaps, not claps. You feel the rhythm of revolt in Punjabi, in Hindi, in every bowl of lentils passed around like communion. Still, violence comes. Police batons, water cannons, internet shutdowns. But the protesters stay. Through heat waves, through winter, through silence. And in the end, the laws are repealed. Not because of one loud speech, but because of a million quiet refusals. You exhale. But then Europe. You're walking down a Dutch highway in 2022. A line of tractors blocks the lanes, their headlights glowing in the mist. The farmers are protesting environmental laws now, emission cuts that threaten their entire way of life. Whether you agree with the cause or not, you can't deny the image. Giant machines crawling toward city centers, forcing the state to listen. One man's sign reads, "No farmers, no food." Another has duct-taped tulips to his windshield. Somehow, it hits harder than any chant. Protest here feels different. Less desperate, maybe, but no less passionate. You hop across the continent. In Spain, young people dressed as old people march slowly through the streets, protesting pension cuts. One carries a sign that says, "I'm 27. I walk like I'm 72. That's the future." In Italy, protesters toss glitter bombs in parliament. Yes, glitter. It clings to suits like guilt. It's harder to brush off than truth. In France, people march with frying pans, banging them together to drown out Macron's speeches. They call them casserolades. You stand amid the clanging chaos, watching a woman hold up a burnt spatula like it's a relic. You laugh. Then you look closer and realize her pan has a dent. From riot police. Then, the United Kingdom. You're on a train platform during a massive transport strike. Conductors, cleaners, signal workers, they're not shouting, just standing. The silence is a wall. One fringe moment, someone turns the train delay signs into protest poetry. This train is delayed. This wage is denied. This dignity is withheld. You catch a bus with a driver wearing a badge that says, "I'm striking with my eyes." And then, as if summoned, the sound of music. Always, always music. Street violinists playing Bella Ciao under a gray London sky. A choir of nurses singing "Lean on Me" outside a shuttered hospital. Even football chants rewritten as union anthems. You sit on the curb listening, your breath misting the air. What is this new protest? It's not revolution. It's not the barricades. It's the in-between. It's the everyday. It's the people who fix your plumbing, deliver your food, wire your streetlights, standing up, even if just for a minute, and saying, "I'm more than my job." And the governments. Sometimes they listen. Sometimes they dig in. But protest doesn't disappear. It wears a high-vis vest. It smells like coffee and road salt. It arrives quietly and then stays longer than you expected. You lie down in the grass just off a roundabout. Someone spray-painted a cow on the traffic sign, wearing sunglasses and holding a pitchfork. You chuckle, then close your eyes. Tractors rumble in the distance. But you're not afraid, because even here, in spreadsheets and subsidies and toll booths and tractors, protest is alive. It just smells like diesel instead of dynamite. The rumble of tractors fades, replaced by the high-pitched ping of a notification. You're not on a highway anymore. You're on a phone. The glow of the screen bleeds into your face. Welcome to Protest 2.0, or maybe 3.0. The hashtag years. The years of both Molotovs and memes. You're scrolling now. Swipe up, tap, click. What are we angry about today? It's not apathy. It's overload. The Arab Spring is what they'll call it later. But you're in the middle of it now in Tunisia, 2010. A man named Mohamed Bouazizi sets himself on fire after police harass him for selling vegetables without a permit. You stand outside the market where it happened. The spot is still scorched, but the air, charged. Protests erupt almost immediately. People flood the streets. They film. They post. They tweet. You walk behind a woman holding her phone high above her head, recording everything. The crowd chants in Arabic, but one voice says it in English for the stream. We want dignity. That's it. Just dignity. Then Egypt, Tahrir Square, 2011. You're crushed in the crowd, pressed between strangers who aren't strangers anymore. Someone hands you water. Someone else passes a handwritten sign. We are not afraid. They chant, dance, pray, laugh, sleep on cardboard, charge their phones off car batteries. Some bring books, others medical supplies. You've never seen anything so organized and so chaotic at the same time. It feels like the internet has materialized in real life. But then come the rubber bullets, the tanks, the tear gas that tastes like metal and memory. Hosni Mubarak falls. The world cheers. And then it gets complicated. Historians still argue whether the Arab Spring was a success, a tragedy, or something in between. But you know this. People screamed into the dark. And for a while, the world heard them. You scroll again. Occupy Wall Street, 2011, New York City. You step into Zuccotti Park. It's part campground, part university, part drum circle. No leader, no single demand, just one cry repeated over and over. We are the 99%. You see a girl writing slogans on sticky notes and slapping them onto the wall. One says, I have 2 jobs and no health care. Another, my student debt is bigger than my future. It doesn't end with laws changing, but you walk away thinking differently. Protest, it seems, doesn't always want to win. Sometimes it wants to interrupt, to say, hey, stop scrolling, look. Then you're in Ferguson, Missouri, 2014. The police have tanks. The protesters have signs and cell phones. Someone behind you is live streaming. Someone else is handing out milk for tear gas burns. A chant rolls through the night like thunder. Hands up, don't shoot. It starts here, but it echoes everywhere. BLM, Black Lives Matter. From the streets of Minneapolis, to Paris, to Sydney, to Cape Town, the same names are said over and over. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland. You see their names on walls, on masks, on murals. You trace your finger over a giant portrait painted on the side of a brick building. The eyes follow you, not accusing, just present, watching. One fringe story. A protester at a London march brought a bag of sidewalk chalk and handed it to children. They didn't march. They just wrote, I love you, and please don't hurt us on the steps of Parliament. No one arrested them, but no one looked away either. You move next to Nigeria, 2020. The Yansh Ensars movement. You've seen it already, but this time you watch it from the inside. The crowd is younger than ever. The signs are sharper. One reads, "You mess with a generation raised on the internet. Good luck." They live stream police abuse, call for action, sing, dance, create. Protest becomes art. Protest becomes tech. Protest becomes now. And the government panics. The army opens fire. The power goes out. The screams do not. Still, even after the smoke clears, the tweets go on. You blink and find yourself in Belarus 2020. The president claims a fake election win. Protesters form human chains. Women in white dresses hand out flowers. They're not screaming. They're staring. The riot police hesitate. Fringe fact? One protester wrote the entire Belarusian constitution on her bedsheet and hung it from her balcony. When it was taken down, she painted it again. This time on her garage. You scroll again. TikTok activists, meme-based protests, Google Docs of how to march safely going viral overnight. Protest is now a downloadable format. But with all this speed comes exhaustion. You see it in a young woman in Bogota. She holds a sign that reads, "We protest." You ignore. "We protest louder." You silence. "We cry." Her voice shakes. Her knees do too. But she stays. Protest in the hashtag age burns fast. But not always bright. Sometimes it flickers. Sometimes it goes viral before it's ready. Sometimes it's just noise. But other times, it's lightning in a bottle. It topples presidents. It shifts minds. It births movements. Tonight, you lie on a rooftop in a city you can't name, next to a charger at 8% and a heart at full capacity. You scroll, then stop, then breathe. Because even here in a world of infinite feeds and 1-second attention spans, the real protest is still happening, not on screen, but in the moment. Someone decides to post anyway, to speak anyway, to care, out loud. You're not scrolling anymore. You're standing, feet on pavement, lights above you, something in your chest, trembling, waiting. The protests of the last decade haven't ended. They've just blended, online and offline, private and public, rage and rhythm. Welcome to the present, or what feels like it. You're in Santiago, Chile, 2019. It started over a few cents. Subway fare went up. That's it. That's all. But beneath that fare hike, years of inequality, privatized education, healthcare that feels like a game show, wages that vanish before the 15th of the month. And suddenly, thousands are in the streets, banging pots and pans, jumping subway turnstiles. A phrase appears. It's not about 30 pesos. It's about 30 years. You watch a protester lift a manhole cover and slam it back down in rhythm. Cacerolazo, the protest of the pan. People lean from balconies, clanging cutlery like it's percussion. The whole city becomes a kitchen band. And then, the violence. Rubber bullets, real bullets. Water cannons dyed blue so authorities can identify protesters later. You help a boy wash pepper spray from his eyes using milk stolen from a broken grocery fridge. He's maybe 13, and still, they stay. Within a year, Chile agrees to draft a new constitution. Not perfect, but proof. Now shift. You're in Lebanon, Beirut, 2019. The government tries to tax WhatsApp calls. Yes, that's the spark. But the fire? That's everything else. Decades of corruption, trash piling in the streets, electricity that flickers like it's shy. So people pour into Martyr Square. They chant. They build pop-up libraries, set up public yoga, DJ booths. You're there when someone starts blasting techno in front of a line of riot cops. A girl in a hijab dances with a guy in ripped jeans, both laughing, both sweating, both free for a moment. Fringe story? Protesters formed a human chain across the country. over 100 miles long. You joined it without realizing. Now Nigeria again, then France. The gilets jaunes, yellow vests, flood highways, sparked by fuel taxes, but quickly spilling over into class rage. You walk past roundabouts turned into protest camps. Some serve soup, some trade books, others hold dance-offs. Protest as carnival. But there's more. You're in Belarus again. Then Thailand, Myanmar, Colombia. They rise, they fall, they rise again. You begin to lose track of borders. You realize something. All of this, every flag, every chant, every language, it rhymes. You hear "we want dignity" in Farsi, Arabic, Spanish, French, Tagalog, Swahili, Cantonese. It's the same poem, different accents. And then, back in the US 2020. Again, the death of George Floyd, the knee, the breath, the video. You're on the street, Minneapolis. You see the mural go up in real time, paint on brick. Hands shaking, the city burns. Protesters chant through masks. Some carry signs, others just stand. And in some cases, kneel. The silence louder than the sirens. You travel to Portland, Seattle, DC. You see the rise of mutual aid tents, free food, medical supplies, chalk messages that say, "We keep us safe." You meet someone handing out granola bars with their phone number sharpied on each one. "In case you get arrested," they whisper. And then, the election, the insurrection, January 6th. You watch the line blur. Protest or coup. Patriotism or performative fear. You see flags used as weapons and tear gas used in a building meant for democracy. Historians already argue how to name that day. But you know this. Protest isn't always righteous. Sometimes it's a mirror, and not everyone likes what they see. Still, you keep walking. You attend climate marches led by children. One girl carries a sign, "If adults won't save us, we'll save each other." You're in London when Extinction Rebellion glues themselves to buses. In Berlin when activists plant trees in potholes. In Manila when protesters wear fish skeletons on their heads to mourn poisoned rivers. It's global now. Instant. Emotional. Imperfect. And sometimes so beautiful, it hurts. Like when protesters in Belarus release balloons with messages inside. Like when high schoolers walk out, arms linked, singing TikTok remixes of freedom songs from the 60s. Like when a man in a wheelchair gets lifted above a crowd in Cairo just so he can see. You sit down now, on a street bench, still warm from someone else's rage. A sticker on the back reads, "This sidewalk is sacred. People stood here." And they did. You did. Because protest isn't an event anymore. It's an atmosphere. A heartbeat that pulses in marches, memes, Molotovs, manifestos, and that moment when someone just refuses to move. And now you rest your hands in your lap and listen, because the world is still shouting, and it's your turn to decide whether you'll shout back, or stand, or kneel, or simply stay. You don't walk into the next scene. You drift. History has caught up to itself. There are no more neat decades to label, no clean borders to cross. You're everywhere now. And protest? It's not a thing that happens. It's something that never stopped. You hear it in your earbuds. A pop song that sounds suspiciously like resistance. You see it on your feed. A meme that makes you laugh, then ache. You pass it on the street. Someone in a t-shirt with a phrase you've never heard, but feel like you've known forever. You're in Iran, 2022. The death of a young woman, Mahsa Amini, sparks a fire that spreads across cities, screens, hearts. Women remove their hijabs in public. Some burn them. Some simply hold them like flags. Others just walk. Walking is a protest now, and the chants echo from every corner. Women, life, freedom. You're there. You hear it, and it keeps happening. In every country, every context, every system. Protest takes different shapes. In some places, it's a locked arm. In others, it's a hacked website. In others still, it's simply staying alive. Because being visible in a world that wants you hidden, that's protest. Being joyful in a system that only understands despair, that's protest. Telling your story when you're expected to stay quiet? Yes. Still protest. You sit with queer activists in Uganda under threat of arrest, making bracelets that spell out words and secret codes. One laughs and says, "We are not symbols. We are people. But if they want symbols, we'll give them glittery ones." You laugh too. You watch Indigenous land defenders in Canada singing to the trees before chaining themselves to bulldozers. Their song is older than the language of the law. You watch climate strikers walk out of schools with cardboard signs and awkward sunburns. One reads, "I want a future, not detention." You meet a protester in Palestine who teaches resistance through embroidery. Another in Brazil who carves protest messages into fruit at the market. Messages that bruise into visibility by the end of the day. Everywhere the lines blur. Is this a protest? Or just someone refusing to give in? You stand in a bookstore where banned books are hidden in plain sight. You sip tea at a cafe that used to be a prison. You read a zine passed hand to hand in a country where even sharing is risky. And you feel it. The pulse, the heartbeat, the strange eternal rhythm of defiance. Because protest doesn't always start with a plan. Sometimes it starts with a breath, a pause, a question no one's supposed to ask. It began in temples and tombs, in mud huts and palaces, in sugar fields and lecture halls, in silence and in fire. And it never stopped. You lay down now, not on a battlefield or a barricade, but in your own room. The window is cracked, the night air soft. Your phone is charging, your boots are off, and somewhere right now, someone is raising a sign. Someone is marching, someone is singing, someone is sitting, very still, refusing to move. And whether you join them in person, in spirit, or in memory, you've been part of it. This long, strange, beautiful lineage of no, of not yet, of you cannot have all of me. And as your eyes begin to close and the edges of the world blur into that dreamy quiet, you feel it again. That heartbeat, not yours. Ours, protests, still here, still beating, still going. Now, let it all soften. Let the banners fall. Let the chants quiet. Let the smoke clear from your imagination. Breathe out. Slower this time. You've traveled far. Across millennia, across continents, through deserts, cities, jungles, and freezing squares. You've stood with kings and peasants, students and singers, mothers and soldiers, preachers and prisoners. You've marched and knelt, shouted and whispered. But now it's just you, just the stillness. There's no need to hold it all at once. Let the stories settle. Let them become part of the soil inside you, something ancient, warm and humming. Like footsteps you can still feel long after the crowd has gone. You don't have to do anything now. You don't have to prove anything, or fix anything, or even understand it all. You're allowed to rest. Let the timeline fade. Let the names become soft echoes. Let the flags become blankets. The signs, lullabies. You are safe here. Held not in silence, but in history. A history that includes you, that remembers you, that welcomes you back, always. Close your eyes, loosen your jaw, unclench your hands. The world will still be here in the morning. But for now, your only job is to drift. Like candle smoke. Like memory. Like something free. If you've made it all the way to the end, leave a comment and tell me what story you'd like to hear next. I genuinely enjoy seeing and reading every kind word you share. Thank you for watching. Sweet dreams and good night.